Hi everyone. In this clip we're going to talk about the transition from print to digital platforms for content. So magazines continue to exist like we've talked about. So here's an example of a food and a food publication, let's just say, that is very different from its commercial counterparts. So this happens, I think, maybe 2 or 3 times a year. A physical issue will cost you like $20 an issue. It's printed on very heavy paper, on very toothy, uncoated paper. So the physical piece itself is something that is harkening back to a time when materiality was a big component. And in recent years, commercial publications were almost all entirely made of the cheapest possible papers. So this exists as an app, it exists as a website, and it exists as a publication. So you have different ways of consuming the content of the publication. And that's what many of these have, some more than others. So this is what the website looks like for this, and there's also an app version, which is kind of hard to show you. Good is a publication that also has a website. This is a Los Angeles-based publication which focuses on what works, which is a nice twist on the usual doom and gloom content that the news revolves around more often than not. Good is known for its information graphics, and the design of information graphics is a whole area of specialization. And if you're very good at visualizing information in ways that other people can better understand it, there's a lot of work out there that you could get into. Now, the proliferation of publications in the last 15 years has surprisingly exploded. You'd think that as the print era wanes, that physical publications would decrease, but the opposite has been true. There are actually tens of thousands of publications now. And again, many of them have very, very small readerships as opposed to publications with millions of readers. And what you have is a proliferation of specialization into all kinds of different subtopics. And there's just lots and lots and lots of these. If you go to a bookshop that had, like in Silver Lake, there's Skylight Books, and there's Book Soup still over in West Hollywood. There's not many places left to discover these things, but they are still out there. And they're quite interesting. They will set you back some cash. Others have website companions like Juxtapose. This is what the Juxtapose site looks like versus the publication. And then zine culture, which is handmade publications. And this covers a wide variety of content and specializes to readerships that sometimes number in the tens. So here's an excellent reference on Notes from Underground Zines, The Politics of Alternative Culture. And this gives you some detailed insight. If you're interested in this topic, this is a great book to start with. But a lot of these publications have the same appearance as commercial publications because printing has become much cheaper, and digital platforms to design have become much more widely available. And so the increase in quality is exponential. It's not just the Xerox machine and the staple gun that these are made with. And that's how zines started in the 1970s. And so a lot of these also have digital companion sites or apps, depending on the size. Now, to have an app that's fully dynamic, you need money for that. That's not cheap to do. But a website is much more manageable. And so a lot of these will have some form of web presence, if nothing else, just to allow people to discover it. And social media is the way in which they promote it, because there has to be some vector, some way for people who are unaware of something to find out about it. So these are just a few of the companion websites for popular zines, and the linking force between all of these is that really this is all just about the same thing. They're all people who have stories to tell, and they're telling them in unique ways. And so the magazine form is no longer restricted to a piece of paper cut to a similar size and bound together with other pieces of paper. It now can be a lot broader. And that allows for a whole lot more variety. But when it comes right down to it, it's still about telling a story and the dynamics of telling that story. So here's some examples of subculture publications. We're getting into, like, we've gone from mass commercial publications to experimental to popularly commercial to zines, and now subculture, which is very, very specialized. And these are publications that appeal to constituencies that typically have been left out of the larger conversation. Trans culture, queer culture. And a lot of these zines adhere to those constituencies. And these are companion sites for some of these. Maximum Rock and Roll, which ceased publication just a few years ago. I love the idea of Shotgun Seamstress. That just sounds awesome. And some of these have a lo-fi appearance. Some of them have a very commercial appearance, and it just depends on the aesthetics of the editor, of the people who are involved, and it runs the full gamut. Now, these are publications that started as zines and evolved into commercial publications, which continue to be published and are still quite popular. Digital publishing and distribution. So it's a lot easier to publish something online than it is to publish it in print media, but people still like print media. So how do you get smaller and smaller editions of something printed? Services like Lulu and Blurb and Edition 1, pictured here, allow you to do single copy editions of projects at a much more reasonable cost than you would imagine. MagCloud is another popular platform. Blurb, which is tied into your Adobe Suite, so you can print books directly from InDesign through this. Issue, which is another one, and there's lots of idiosyncratic titles that can be discovered straight through this platform. And they all kind of, and this is Lulu, they all kind of go back to the same thing. It's telling a story in a structure. And the structure is somewhat all within a certain range, but how you tell it and what you choose to tell is entirely up to you. And these are just different platforms that can be used to create print versions of your work, as opposed to just having it online. Some people choose to have it just online. Some people want to create a physical companion. In some cases, different parts of the story, or the story is told in different ways depending upon the medium used. That's called transmedia. Zinio is probably the most popular aggregate magazine platform where you can subscribe to the widest variety of magazines that are out there. And then there's content aggregators. Now this is a bit different. Content aggregators are publication, website and app publications that pull content from other sources by theme or topic. And that way you get to read a wide variety of content on a similar subject, but the content is coming from another title. And these have proliferated in recent years. And a lot of this stuff is free or has a very minimal subscription base to it. And the idea of paying for content is something that, and also micro purchases where you pay a nickel or 25 cents to access an article or something. We're going to start seeing more and more of that as time goes on. Medium, which quickly has devolved into a long clickbait, was a project started by the person who created Twitter and who left Twitter and tried to create something that Twitter wasn't. Twitter, of course, has devolved into well, let's just say it's devolved. And Medium was trying to fill a gap for more in-depth and quality publications. But this is basically slightly longer form of the same thing that Twitter devolved into. It's a lot of clickbait, it's a lot of sensational headlines designed to get you to click on it to look what it is, but it's not really telling you a lot of substance because most of the articles are quite short. So where I was really hoping that this might actually take off and become something that was more substantive, meaning that it had more depth of content, it's actually not proving so so far. Hopefully this will change. The Bitter Southerner. Now this one's a very interesting one because this one is like a regional publication, but it's all online. There's no physical component. But it tends to be in depth and well thought out and well illustrated. But it's also not trying to appeal to everything, which is what Medium is trying to do. This is picking a very specific subset, which is Southern culture, contemporary Southern culture. And of course, then there's the blogosphere, which is quite wide in of itself. So the idea of posting a thought, a short article, something casual, social media, for a long time was a component of this before veering off into conspiracy theory hell. And so Twitter and Blogger, which is largely passé at this point, Pinterest, Tumblr, things like that, have been ways that people could post short-form content where when you look at it in a larger archive view, you start getting a sense of a curated view of the world, which was quite interesting. These platforms themselves have seen their ups and downs. DeviantArt was very popular for quite a while. Reddit, which again seems to have descended into Twitter territory, and then this, which is of course the nightmare that that conspiracy theories have all been born out of. Folk is one that's about lifestyle culture, and this is what folk looks like in an aggregate view. So we get to see a sense of the overall style. It's like it creates a self mood board, which is quite interesting. So we get to see the editorial style when we see all the content put together. So when you see it in a scroll form, you see things one at a time. But in this archive view, we start getting a sense of the overall style of the publication, virtually or what have you. This is an architectural blog platform, and then here in their archive view, you see there's a lot of text blended with images, so it seems to be both. And the forms that we're going to be exploring range from print to web to EPUB to app. Now, I doubt that we're going to get to every single one. We're going to talk about all of them and hopefully be able to explore a few in depth.